All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're decoding a really fascinating disconnect, the gap between India's booming macroeconomic headlines and that daily financial squeeze felt by the middle class. I mean, have you ever wondered why the news tells you one thing about our economic triumph, but your wallet tells you a completely different story? Well, let's figure it out together. So, if we are the fastest growing major economy, why does it often feel like you're getting a little poorer every year? To actually understand this paradox, we're going to bypass the headline GDP figures entirely. Instead, we're looking strictly at the real numbers behind our currency, how we measure inflation, and what's actually happening in the real estate market. These are the hidden, structural forces that are actively shaping your daily financial reality.
Section 1. Gold and the falling rupee. Remember when the government publicly asks citizens to stay home, carpool, and literally stop buying gold? The answer to why they did that lies in this staggering number, 800 tons. That is the massive amount of gold India imports every single year, and it creates this continuous heavy outflow of US dollars. The really concerning part here, our import bill isn't growing just because we're buying more gold. It's growing because the value of the rupee itself keeps falling.
Look at the sheer imbalance here. It's absolutely wild. We bring in roughly 800 tons from outside every year, yet we produce a mere 1 ton domestically. Even if we opened new mines, we might, barely hit 2 or 3 tons? So what this means is that almost every single ounce bought by an Indian consumer acts like a giant leak. It directly drains our dollar reserves and puts immense downward pressure on the rupee.
Because we act almost entirely as a net consumer rather than a producer here, analysts are projecting a pretty stark scenario. We could see the rupee continue to depreciate all the way down to 150 against the dollar. Now, textbook economics will tell you, hey, a weaker currency boosts exports, right? Well, actually scratch that. The data tells a completely different story for us. Over the last 14 years, the rupee depreciated by over 60%, yet our exports, as a percentage of GDP, actually fell from 25% down to 21%.
Section 2. The manufacturing reality. You see, a weak currency only really helps your exports if you can actually manufacture goods domestically from scratch. But here's the catch. Even in industries where we claim to be absolute global leaders like pharmaceuticals, we're critically dependent on foreign supply chains just to make the basic products. We're talking about importing 70% of active pharmaceutical ingredients and 90% of key starting materials straight from China. So when we try to boost local production, foreign competitors can just slash their raw material prices by 40 to 50% and crush local Indian competition. Oh, in agriculture, we rely heavily on imported potash and sulfur just to make our basic fertilizers.
This perfectly illustrates a massive strategic gap. While competing nations are out there aggressively securing raw materials globally, like mapping undersea gold or snapping up thorium mines abroad, we're kind of just trapped as buyers. It essentially makes it impossible to truly benefit from a depreciating currency because the raw materials we desperately need just keep getting more and more expensive to import. Plus, the extremely high domestic cost of doing business seriously cripples our ability to manufacture competitively. Just think about this for a second. We cross-subsidize household electricity, keeping it around 5 to 7 rupees a unit, by overcharging our factories 11 to 17 rupees a unit. High fuel taxes are slapped on without giving businesses GST input credits. And while the massive conglomerates can negotiate these sweet 110% SGST refunds and get huge electricity exemptions, the small, everyday business owner gets literally none of that. The playing field is just completely uneven. Section 3. Why inflation feels fake. So, if you constantly feel like your living expenses are jumping by 10 to 15% every year, why on earth does the official data keep telling us inflation is perfectly under control? Well, here is the secret behind the numbers. Our official inflation metric, the Consumer Price Index, bases a massive 46% of its entire calculation solely on food, almost half. This metric was heavily anchored around what people bought back in 2011, which completely skews the data for the modern middle class, whose biggest expenses are definitely no longer just basic groceries. This means that when onion prices spike, it triggers these immediate, frantic policy reactions because it heavily hits that official index and, honestly, election outcomes. But the massive financial realities hitting your family, they are practically invisible in the data. Think about the 15 to 20% annual hyperinflation in your kids' school fees, or the booming $15 billion diagnostic healthcare market. These huge expenses carry close to zero weight in the official CPI calculation. No wonder it feels totally disconnected from reality. The core issue here is mathematically simple, but realistically super flawed. We just cannot average the spending of a daily wage earner with a corporate employee living in Mumbai and somehow expect a single inflation number to reflect reality. Depending on your income bracket, it's like you live in one of 7 completely different Indias. Your personal inflation rate is dictated by your specific life, not a national average that's weighted so heavily by the price of vegetables.
Section 4. The Housing Mirage.
This deep disconnect between the official data and what's actually in your wallet leads us to a really sobering reality check. Home ownership. Most Indians will never be able to own a home. That is a chilling, bold prediction to make, for sure. But it stems directly from the fact that real estate has fundamentally transformed in recent years. It shifted entirely away from providing shelter based on local incomes and turned into a purely financial sinkhole designed to just park immense amounts of wealth.
Just look at how much the market has skewed. Builders are barely creating affordable housing anymore. Today, only 12% of the new housing supply hitting the market is categorized as affordable. On the flip side, over 50% of new developments are luxury homes priced well above 1.5 crore rupees. Why? Simply because the overwhelming financial demand is concentrated entirely in the luxury sector, leaving the average earner completely in the dust. The crazy surge in luxury pricing has totally uncoupled from actual local salaries. So who's actually buying all this? Well, it's driven heavily by massive non-resident Indian, or NRI, remittances. They now account for 20 to 30% of all luxury bookings, basically treating these homes as pure investments. On top of that, real estate acts as a massive sponge for undeclared cash. Believe it or not, since demonetization, the cash in circulation has actually doubled to a staggering 34 lakh crore rupees, and a huge chunk of that money is seeking a safe, appreciating haven in brick and mortar.
And because of all this, we are left with a staggering paradox. Over 2 crore completed homes are currently sitting entirely empty. Let that sink in for a second. 20 million homes completely empty, held purely as investment vehicles, while millions of hard-working citizens are facing a devastating shortage of affordable shelter. It's incredible.
Section 5. The Path Forward.
So, we've looked at the falling rupee, the surprisingly high cost of domestic manufacturing, the skewed inflation data, and that whole real estate mirage. It's a lot to process, I know. But until we start prioritizing these structural realities, like lowering the true cost of making things here, incentivizing all businesses fairly, and finally untangling our deep dependency on foreign imports, we have to ask ourselves an absolutely critical question. Are we going to build an economy that actually empowers producers from the ground up, or are we just content to remain a massive dependent market of consumers? Really, what kind of economy do you demand for the future? I'll leave you to think on that.